Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Patridge. Welcome to the Sabula Tech channel. Today's video is going to be something up the alley for people who are interested in vacuum forming and vacuum forming RC car bodies. This is going to be covering traditional methods that the molds or forms or bucks were created for creating RC bodies. Now, the current methods can involve CNC machines with aluminum. You can have, probably not too much with RC car bodies because of the thin gauge material, but you can have wren-shaped material, like a foam type material that they'll CNC and carve out. Now, when they do the metal ones, often now there are heaters or cooling stuff in them if they're doing high volume production, depending where they're at. This will probably be more your big manufacturers are going to be doing that. Then they also will not be what's called like a buck type shape or a form and everything to it like this. They will be female versions of it. And what you do then is the plastic gets sucked down into the cavity. And the reason a lot of them are done that way now is because if you get a body from some of the big manufacturers right now and something coming from China, they will be pre-painted or pre-artwork done to them. And the artwork is on the inside of the body like traditional painting methods for RC car bodies. But the plastic is actually comes as a sheet to them with the artwork already on it, and then they engage the vacuum and it sucks everything in. And if you had the artwork on the inside like you normally do on something like this, it would stick to the form or buck. It would potentially damage that paint and everything on there. So there's methods now. You have stretchable inks, and that's how they get those on the Traxxas and Losis and Armas and whatever else is out there. Stretchable inks that then in a female buck or female form, they suck it down in, and then that gets the body and they pop it out. And to be honest, in some of the female forms, you can actually get, in some cases, much better quality detailed stuff than you can in the bucks or forms traditionally used. So that takes care of how it's kind of done now. There are still people doing it the traditional way. The small manufacturers are doing it that way, but traditionally what was done is a wood buck or sometimes plaster, and then what we have here. This is a two-part epoxy with aluminum powder filler in it. Now we do have we have actually just one. we have one form that has iron powder was used in it, and it has a problem with rusting. And that's a big deal for us. We've got to treat it, gingerly. And it's not real great to have it with iron in it, but that's what they did. Can't help it. Now, we have some forms that were reproductions of companies' bodies that were made a long time ago that are no longer around anymore, or they aren't making them anymore. And one of the things they were made with apparently a particular formula from a particular manufacturer that is not very heat tolerant in some cases. You can see actually if you get the buck very warm with the heat gun, it starts to kind of bubble or rise up in spots because it's expanding under heat. That resin is expanding under heat. And that is because it has a lower content of aluminum in it, most likely, plus it may be a blend of epoxy that is not as heat tolerant. Now, the bad side of doing the way you see on YouTube right now with the plaster is that plaster is softer and it will be abraded away over time, and you will actually lose your original shape over time. The benefit of the plaster is that you can repair it fairly easily. Then the way that DOMS used to have some of their forms back in the day, DAHMS, it was a company that existed way back in the 80s and into the 90s. It created RC bodies. They did their bucks and forms out of wood, carved wood. And the problem with wood is that it tends to shrink and crack over time after the heat exposure. You have to come in with some sort of filler like Bondo to fill in those cracks. And now you're going to see those marks where you filled it in your body that you create with that particular form. And so it may not look as good as it once did. The wood forms would generally be used a lot of times by creators to make a master. Now you would carve it out of wood or even plaster, what they called a master, that would get your general shape and size and dimensions of whatever you wanted to create. And then when you were all done with that, you would put it in a box and you would pour some sort of form material in there, silicone or something else, to get a female version of that basic master made. And then once you did that, you pulled out your master wood or plaster form that you had carved. And when you did this, also I should mention, step back, when you do it, you would just get the basic form of the vehicle. You would not put in the details like hood lines and doors and windows and headlights. None of that's put in at this stage. Just the basic shape. So let's go back. Okay, so now you've got your female version of the mold. You pour your material into that female version to get your final mold that you're going to use. Then once that is done and created, then you come in and you carve in your defined details into your form and buck. I know one of the guys at Bullink who created most of these molds you see here, Rick Jordan, one of their methods is he would make a body of that basic form first before he ever put the shapes in, and he would draw out on the body some of those final details to get a kind of idea of where everything was going to be laid out before he did his cutting into that mold that he made. Now, on YouTube, you'll see a lot of guys are doing plaster, and that's okay for small runs. If you're trying to do larger runs and you want something that's heat tolerant, you really want to do an epoxy resin like this with aluminum powder in it. And there's a lot of sources to get that stuff. There's many out there. I won't even list them because if you just do a basic Google search, you can find a lot of stuff on there. Your only thing you want to make sure is you find something that's heat tolerant. If you don't, that's when you're going to get into troubles. Now, the other big problem with what you see on YouTube is they don't show you really the correct way to really make that plaster even mold. It's not accurate to get the best results. And that's because these guys haven't ever been exposed to the correct way. So here today, we're gonna do it. And the way I'm gonna kind of introduce you to what's going on, why these are really different, I'm gonna use this scale. This is how I'm gonna demonstrate what the difference is on it. So let's fire the scale up here. And you can see I've got quite a variety of different forms here. And no lie, they weigh a good chunk, you know, with it. Doesn't matter what the filler in it, it's gonna weigh quite a bit when you get something this size. All right, so I'm gonna start over here with this pickup truck. And as you'll see here, 9.8 pounds it looks like, which is pretty good heft to it. Then we'll go over to this one. This one's got a little spacer underneath it to help form stuff correctly. And that one is 10.4 pounds. And you can see some tape on here. That's because this one's undergoing some restoration to repair some damage to it and some just overall bubble defects in the original casting that was never ever taken care of. Then we've got this one here, and it's on a metal plate, similar to kind of like this wood one. But this is how they mounted them to the machines back in the day. This one is 13.2. Now, you can see all of these are pretty good size. This is the smallest one. Put this one over here. Now, this one is the heaviest, 15.8 pounds. All right, which is kind of deceiving. And a lot of times you could run into different weights of these depending on what they used for the resin, because there can be a different amount of aluminum powder used in those particular blends. You can have more or less powder depending on the manufacturer. One thing you may want to look at is this manufacturer spec sheets and what they say how much powder's in it for theirs. And sometimes, in some cases, you can add more to it, or it may not come with any and you're expected to add it to it when you mix it. But you got to consult with the manufacturer to figure out the best thing. So let me get the scale out of the way here and we'll continue on. All right, so some of you are probably watching this and going, oh, I know why such drastically different weights. I know what they do wrong on YouTube. And maybe you've seen the video from, it was about 8 months ago when we first got all the new molds out of the storage unit, the abandoned storage unit. And I demonstrated kind of what was the big difference. But if you missed that video, which was 5 hours long, but it was at the beginning of the video, this is gonna explain it to you now. And for a lot of people, this is probably gonna kind of blow your mind on how these were made. Now, some of you may already know that when you make these and you put in the fine details, if you want to get the plastic to go down into those nooks and crannies, you have to put in little holes into them to get the air to escape out, have somewhere to go, because it may be trapped if you don't. And you'll get best results definitely by putting in those little holes. Now you may have to test it a little bit. You may have to form a body on there, see how it behaves, and then kind of decide just strategically where you need to place those holes at. Now it's best to put them in kind of corners or of course in valleys and everything to hide the fact that you put an air hole there. If you put it in the middle of a flat spot, people are going to see when they get their body, or you're going to see that little spot where the plastic deformed more because it got pulled down into that little hole. There's just no way around it. So it's best if you can to put it in an area where it's going to be kind of hidden, because plastic won't get fully pulled into a corner, and so you won't see that hole. Let's show you this one first. So this was the heaviest one at 15.8 pounds. This is a pretty old one. I don't know that Bowlink ever ran this one when they had normal part numbers and names like they did later on. I don't know if this was a prototype or what's going on here with this one. I've never found any documentation on what this is supposed to be for, or what model it is at all. But let's flip it over here, and you can see all these larger holes in the form, and those are to get access to the little air escape holes that are on the top side, because you may not have a drill bit long enough to get in there from the top side for it to go all the way to the other side for the air to come out through. So you got to put them in the top side, and then you got to make much bigger drill holes on the bottom side to try and find where you put that other one in at. Now this is, you know, pretty hefty. This is what you normally see on YouTube, everybody doing out of plaster. And guess what? This is wrong, completely wrong. This is not how you want to do it. Don't do it this way. You get a heavy, huge part like that. Nope. You ready for this? This is gonna blow some of your minds. Boom! Hollow! That's right. They are a shell. They are a shell of the performer cells. But no, this is how they are traditionally made. And then you don't need the real big long drill bits. You don't need to come in from the backside with another drill to get at things. Now this can introduce some of its own problems if you don't form it at the right thickness. That stuff can crack or break under pressure depending on your vacuum pressure you have. If you're using a shop vac, it's probably not too much, of a big deal. But yeah, this is how it's normally done. This mold right here that I showed you first, that's the only one in all the 180, almost 200, I think, molds that we have that is like that for car bodies. Now, your smaller things like wings and figures and stuff like that may still be like this. Not all the time though. But the bodies for cars and trucks and buggies and everything, they're gonna be like this. One of the things I'll demonstrate here, so I was talking about they can be under pressure and you could crack the thing. So this was a method that they used at Bowlink to kind of get around that. Now they've reinforced this one inside as well with some material, and I would guess because they were noticing it deform under pressure. And that is one thing nice about these. When they are heated up, they don't tend to crack too much. They will kind of deform. And we have a mold that we've got to do some work on to try and create a little brace like that underneath it that we saw when we were forming with it, that it was deflecting under pressure. But yeah, put some material in here, then a little pole to support that so it can't deflect too much under vacuum. Then over here on this one, same thing. This has got one as well on it, mounted to the mounting plate. This one they didn't have any material inside. Must not have needed it, I guess. In this case, they got it lined up in, I guess, in an accurate spot. The other thing I should mention too is that the mounting holes on these were put in it. They would drill it and tap it, and under vacuum and heat and expansion, sometimes these mounting holes would crack out because there wasn't enough material on there. And like this one here, it cracked completely out, and we've tried to put in some material. We've got to re-drill and re-tap this hole Some other ones we've come in and reinforced them before they get any worse. There's a lot of these that are this way in our collection that we've had to come in and do a little repair work to because they've been splitting out. Now, a lot of the manufacturers for the two-part epoxy recommend a minimum and maximum thickness on their parts. And it's generally, I think it's generally around 1 inch for a lot of them. And so you've got to come up with a plug when you're casting that you pour your stuff in, and you put that in there to create your cavity in there. And you got to make sure you get it fairly accurate to what your final, you know, thickness needs to be. So that can be a little tricky as well to get that all correct. Then if you try to do something real thick like this, they actually recommend you have real larger aluminum chunks in it, for at least in a couple of manufacturers, so that it doesn't shrink up too much and just deform, and yeah, just too much of that epoxy resin. Because one thing these things can do when they're curing, they can get incredibly hot actually. They're, what do they call it? I think exothermic reaction takes place. So yeah, that's the traditional method of making RC car molds or forms, or bucks really. Buck is a male version of a form. I hate that buck word. I don't use it a whole lot because most people don't know what you're talking about. So I usually use mold or form in most cases. Now, we have some, let me get you those other ones that have been altered after the fact. Major alterations. Let me show you what those look like and why you may not want to do something like that if you're doing your own stuff. All right, so these 3 forms right here demonstrate basically 3 different issues or potential problems they had with them, and what they did to kind of fix the issues. They are fairly intense on these 2, especially over here, to fix the issue they were trying to take care of. And it looks like, for example, on this one, this is I think the oldest one here, that they wanted to make this a little bit longer. It wasn't the correct length. And what they did then is they cut it in the back, put a piece of wood in here, and then it was recessed over the overall height of the form already, and they filled it in with material, and then they came in and sanded it down. And there were some air bubbles in this that we kind of filled in since we've had it now, because those probably would have shown up in any sort of body that was created with it and everything. But overall, because it looks like they matched the material that and the thickness and everything else very well, you cannot really see in a final body where this patch was done on it at all. It is really well done. I'm very happy with it, because there are some ones we have where unfortunately they did not come out so well. And those they expanded, and they did little side pods like on an F1 Indy car. They made the overall thing wider, and you can clearly see where they did the filler and everything in it. It's pretty clear that there was some work done to it. Now this one over here, apparently they weren't happy with the overall width of this, and I'm gonna guess this was an alteration of a master that they had already that was wider, and they decided they want to make this one narrower. I don't know for sure, but I have a feeling they removed a center section of one of these after they poured and created this. They chopped it in half basically with a saw, and then they put in new material right down the middle. And in this case, it looks like they put tape on the back side here, and then put in material from the top and filled it all in. I don't know that they did it from the other side. Maybe they did. There is a lot of air bubbles in this seam or this fill in here, so I'm not 100% positive how they did it, but I think they filled it from the top on this one as well. And it does have, we'll get a close-up picture or video here of it, does have a faint line. You can clearly see through it where they patched and filled in and everything. We haven't run anything on this one yet. This one's an upcoming one, so I don't know for sure if you'll be able to see it in it. One of the dangers when you mix stuff 2 different times together, 2 different points, is that they can expand differently. Same problem comes into play when you're making the first form initially too. If you don't mix the stuff well, you will get hot spots that will expand differently and create bubbles and stuff like that. We have one that was a reproduction that is pretty much out of commission now, because for Mr. Lexan, who we got the mold from, the person who created the mold didn't properly mix the two parts together, and there's a spot in it that expands quite a bit and bubbles up under heat. And now it's actually finally cracked and flaked off because of that difference in expansion. And yeah, so when you're doing these, you have to make sure you get them mixed properly together. If you don't scrape, like they always show, the inside of the container that you're mixing them in good to get them all mixed in, you can end up with a bad pour, and then you will end up with issues with your final mold and form. Over here is a totally different issue they were trying to solve by adding some material, same material to it on the outside around here. Now, what they were probably having a problem with is that when you have steep corners like this, you tend to get webbing in the corners when it gets formed and everything. And they were trying to eliminate that. And so they put this little kind of like bib or shape around it to kind of suck up and use up some of that material so that it didn't make that shape. And it was below what I guess they planned the cut line on it. They also did it on the front due to age and wear and probably not prepping the surface enough. Some of it's chipped off and everything. When you're using the type of machines they were using on this, which in this case would have been skin packaging machine, you don't have some of the flexibility that we kind of have on our machine. So you have to do something like this. They have another mold that they created back in the day that looks very similar to this, and they used a wood piece that would attach here to do the same sort of thing. We don't use it now that we're using that form. We don't use the wood form because our machine has some better controls for it, and we get it below the cut line where it's fine. It doesn't really matter. It's more of a, I guess, a thing that isn't important. I mean, you could try and work that way out, for the final product, but the user is just going to cut that part out anyway, so it doesn't really, make it worth the time and effort to mess with it. So this takes care of this video for today. I'm not going to do anything more. We're going to have some future videos where we're going to some other topics. They'll probably be a little shorter than this one. This is a long one, a lot of information. We don't want to make it any more, information trying to squeezed in here, and too much information at once can get you, out of it. Plus, it's getting to be a long video probably already at this point. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm not going to say thank you for watching because, I'm providing all the knowledge to you. You should be thanking me. So, put the thank yous in the comment, that's appreciated. Thumbs up if you want. Not really that important to me. I do this just partially for fun, but also sharing knowledge out there with people, and I get a kick out of it. So it is something that I enjoy, and I would probably still do it even if maybe 2 people watch this video. Have a great day. Bye.